Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Disney. Expert financial analyst Dan Ives says Disney will absolutely sell ESPN to Apple. Dan Ives is kind of a big deal. He's very well known in finance. Let's get into the story and really find out what's going on. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you. I'm trying to get to 30,000 subscribers, so if you can subscribe, please do subscribe. Coming from the Motley Fool, should Apple buy ESPN from Disney? Wall Street analyst Dan Ives thinks it's a no-brainer and that it's going to happen. Many view ESPN as the crown jewel of Walt Disney's TV empire. But now one prominent analyst believes that Disney will give up that crown jewel in the not-too-distant future to Apple. Wedbush's Dan Ives stated on CNBC's Last Call program last week, "I believe it's a matter of when, not if, ESPN and Apple get together." Ives is cheering on a deal, recently writing to clients that it's a no-brainer. Is he right? Why Apple might be motivated. There have been rumors for years that Apple could acquire Disney outright. Ives doesn't think such a large transaction is likely. However, he believes that Apple would love to have ESPN. ESPN really is a one-of-a-kind asset, and it is organized now separately from the rest of the Disney company. 20% of ESPN Disney doesn't even own. So it is possible some big money deal could come through and Disney really could use the cash. Apple has already moved into streaming TV in a major way with Apple TV Plus. While Apple TV Plus has attracted viewers with high quality productions such as Ted Lasso and Severance, it has also expanded into live sports. This move is already paying off nicely for Apple. MLS Season Pass subscriptions on Apple TV Plus doubled since Lionel Messi joined Major League Soccer's Inter Miami franchise. Ives argued on CNBC that, quote, live sports content is the golden goose. ESPN ranks as the longtime leader in providing live sports content at the college and professional levels. The Wedbush analyst thinks that Apple and ESPN make a perfect fit. It's also important to know that Apple has many ways of making money by offering sports streaming. Sure, they can charge subscriptions for it, but they have massive distribution because of their iPhone, and it also could very well inspire some people to get an iPhone instead of getting a competing phone product, which brings even more people into their whole business ecosystem. Additionally, if they screw up and they lose $5 billion here or $10 billion there, they can make it up 5-10 years later with a new, evolved sports offering, whatever the heck that might be. Disney can't afford to wait for returns on investment like that, and they also don't manage assets very well. Apple does. Big money for a big guy. Would Disney be interested in selling ESPN to Apple? Disney CEO Bob Iger said in the quarterly update earlier this month that the company is considering potential strategic partnerships for ESPN, looking at distribution, technology, marketing, and content opportunities where we retain control of ESPN. It's possible that Apple could be the strategic partner that Disney seeks. Ives, though, believes that an outright acquisition of ESPN by Apple is more likely. Perhaps the right price would entice Iger to put ESPN up for sale. How much would a deal cost Apple? Probably around $50 billion according to Ives. That price tag isn't too much of a stretch for Apple. The tech giant's cash stockpile totaled nearly $59 billion as of July 1st. Apple's on track to generate operating cash flow of around $120 billion in its current fiscal year. ESPN has been valued at around $50 billion for actually a long time. I saw an article in 2014 that valued ESPN at $50 billion. Their subscriptions have dropped off as people disconnect basic cable, so that basic distribution model isn't working. Somebody needs to make an absolute gigantic cash investment in ESPN to transition it from cable distribution to streaming distribution and figure out how to justify all those numbers. This is one of the reasons why you've got Iger bringing in Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs, former Disney executives, to try to figure out who could we do a deal with. I agree with Dan Ives. I don't see Apple just writing checks and giving control to Disney. Also because realistically, they probably do need to experiment with how they're going to offer things, and they need to lose a few $100 million here, maybe $1 billion there. Apple's not going to lose that money for Disney to retain control and ownership of it. It just is not going to work that way. Is it really a no-brainer deal? I've told CNBC We believe an acquisition could clearly happen here as we look into the next 6 to 9 months. However, there are a few reasons why Apple acquiring ESPN from Disney might not be such a no-brainer deal for either company. As Ives' comments in the recent quarterly conference call indicate, Disney is looking for a partner for ESPN, not a buyer. He said that the company has already received notable interest from many entities. The integration between ESPN and ABC, which Disney also owns, could also present a problem. Iger has stated that all options are on the table with its linear networks, including a potential sale. However, ABC's value could be lower with access to ESPN's content. If Apple acquired ESPN without also buying ABC, it could complicate matters for Disney. Apple could be more reluctant to fork out $50 billion or more to get ESPN than Ives thinks. The company's biggest acquisition so far was buying Beats in 2014 for $3 billion. Apple clearly hasn't been willing to pull the trigger on huge deals in the past. I've seen a valuation, by the way, for ABC at around $7 billion. That's the number people are putting on it in the finance community. There is, however, one wild card that just might tip the scales in favor of Apple acquiring ESPN. Apple plans to launch its Vision Pro mixed reality headset next year. Disney's streaming service, Disney Plus, will be integrated with Vision Pro in several ways. The opportunities to tie in live sports with the mixed reality device could be so appealing that Apple decides to acquire ESPN. Granted, Apple and Disney will probably work together on such integration anyway. One big hint, a video shown at Apple's 2023 Worldwide Developers Conference introducing Vision Pro showed a 3D view of a basketball game. However, if Apple owned ESPN, it would have full control over how it offers a huge array of sports content with Vision Pro. So will Apple acquire ESPN? Nobody knows. Even if the deal doesn't happen, though, it would be shocking if Apple doesn't at least walk away as the major strategic partner for ESPN that Disney says it wants. Either way, it could be good news for Apple shareholders. Long term, and this is not investment advice, but long term, people think Apple is just going to keep growing and growing and growing. And it's because of things like this. Obviously, ESPN is valuable. Exactly how to structure ESPN with streaming, with gambling, with this immersive 3D experience, with their new fancy Vision Pro headsets. Who knows how it's going to be done? But you do need to have distribution, which Apple does, and it's unique to Apple. Apple is not allowing everyone to have their distribution, and you do need to have all sorts of money to invest in what does and doesn't work out when it comes to formats. It really would be a unique thing for Apple to control ESPN and could be like a killer value and a killer application that really would be irreplaceable by anyone. Also, Apple has investments internationally. ESPN has investments internationally, but ESPN isn't expanding as aggressively internationally as it could. And why? Because this costs millions upon millions of dollars. And as we know, Disney is kind of struggling a little bit to make themselves profitable with all of the bad management and the woke failures with all of their content. Apple could utilize sports, live sports, which is something really successful in multiple countries. Think, for example, of Disney losing all of those millions of subscribers in India because they didn't want to pay up for sports licensing for their streaming service. Do you think that would have happened to Apple? No. Apple would have just wrote the check and done the deal, built their business, and built their sports franchise. It also makes sense to leverage additional streaming offerings on top of your sports service. Disney's ESPN has allowed Disney to distribute whatever cable channels they wanted to distribute at a ridiculously high price compared to other cable channels. Why? Because Disney sells it in a bundle. If you want the sports that Disney provides on cable through ESPN, you're going to have to pay up for the Disney Channel and FX and National Geographic and whatever other titles that they want to offer. There's really nothing cable companies can do to push back on Disney. And Bob Iger absolutely loves that. They've been killing it for decades, making an absolute fortune on their linear channels, the cable businesses, because of the nature of the business, but in particular because they controlled ESPN. So why doesn't that translate to streaming? Well, it does translate to streaming, but you need to have a lot of cash. Apple has that, and a lot of distribution. Apple has that too. Netflix could also do something like this, but is Netflix going to go and buy ESPN from Disney? I haven't seen one article discussing that. That ain't likely to happen. Apple buying it, though, is very likely to happen. And not the whole Disney company, but probably ESPN. I think it makes a lot of sense. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Do you think that Apple will buy ESPN, or do you think maybe they'll write Bob Iger a check for $20 billion for a big chunk of it and say, hey, Bob, here's $20 billion, go have a good time with it? Or do you think, like I'm saying, kind of unrealistic, much more realistic, that Apple pays what it needs to pay? If they need to buy ABC, throw another $7 billion on the total. Here's your $57 billion. They get full ownership, full control, and then they figure out how to distribute it internationally through their iPhone, through their streaming, and build an incredible business as Disney continues to collapse. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.